Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another single song reaction here on my channel. I'm very excited about this. I am a big fan of In This Moment, though I do feel like their last, we'll say 2, maybe 3 albums have been overall slightly disappointing to me. But anyway, I'm still very excited for this. I was initially going to be doing this reaction last night when I was scheduled to record my Metallica Saint Anger reaction on my channel. So if you're a Metallica fan, you didn't know that I do those here. Since the beginning of this year, I've been going through all the Metallica albums. So if that sounds interesting, check those out. But I had my next Metallica album reaction scheduled to do with one of my friends named Chris, and he is also a fan of In This Moment. So we were going to do the reaction together. However, at the last second, it got canceled. That recording session at least got canceled. So instead, I reacted to Taylor Swift's new version of Speak Now. So that's going to also be on my channel eventually here in the coming days, hopefully. But yeah, so I was excited to do this, and then I totally forgot to film this video last night when this is the day after the song came out. So I saw the song was released yesterday, so I'm very excited to listen to it. I'm going to be listening to the ripped audio from the YouTube video. So I went to the YouTube video and I clicked play and I let it play, and I just walked away from my computer for a while to give them a full view of the song, to give them the view. And then I ripped the audio because my computer does not have the enough power to let me watch a video. So I will not be reacting to the video. I guess I could have the video on my phone. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We're just going to listen to the audio. But I want to say, I was looking this song up here. I was looking on the YouTube video just when you click more details, and I was looking at the different things that it mentioned in there. And so let me actually just bring this up because I think it's interesting, and I'm kind of excited because of what I saw. Okay, so it has listed underneath the music video here, it has listed this big list of people who it says, like the director, all these things. It says, hairstylist, all these different, aspects, storyboarding, which was actually done by Maria Brink, which is pretty cool. So it goes all through all these different things. And on the very bottom, it says song produced, co-written, mixed, and mastered by Kane Churko. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. But I saw that name, Kane Churko, and I was a little bit surprised because I know Churko is a name that I've associated with this band since I think maybe even the beginning of their career, which was their first album was what? Wasteland, the Wasteland album, and then Dream, which is my favorite album of theirs, and then the one with Iron Army on it, which is my favorite song off that album. Oh no, that's the American Wasteland one, the sort of cowboy-y one. There's like a cowboy-ish vibe to that one. And then Blood, and then Black Widow, then Ritual, and then I think most recently Mother. So I've associated, in my head I was thinking Kevin Churko and not Kane Churko. And so I just looked this up, and I was going to point this out because I think it's interesting. It says Kevin Churko. I looked him up on Wiki. He's a record producer, sound engineer, and musician. And it says best known for working with Ozzy Osbourne, Papa Roach, Five Finger Death Punch, which Five Finger Death Punch and In This Moment both have a very similar sound in terms of their production. There's aspects to the production that both of those bands have that I enjoy, and then there's other aspects to their production that I don't enjoy. But okay, right here it says he is the father of Kane Churko and brother of Corey Churko. So interesting. Okay, I did not see that the first time. But Kevin Churko has worked with, I think if we look, yes, he did In This Moment's album, The Dream. I believe it's produced, recorded, and all that stuff. In This Moment's The Dream, In This Moment, A Star-Crossed Wasteland. So he didn't do their first album. I forget what that one's called. He did basically all the Five Finger Death Punch albums. In This Moment's album, Blood. Rob Zombie, Venomous Rat Regeneration Vendor, which is one of my favorite Rob Zombie albums. I think that is probably his best sounding album sonically. Black Widow, Ritual, Mother. Okay? So he has done, I believe this is produced and basically been the main driving force behind all of In This Moment's other albums, with the exception of their very first one. But I have to say here, I think The Dream, their album, sounds fantastic. I actually have the vinyl of it over there, and the CD's up in my room. But I think that album sounds fantastic. It's mixed very well. Their next album, A Star-Crossed Wasteland, is one of the most egregious examples of overcompression that I've ever heard. And I do not throw that term around lightly. And there are certain things I've heard that are maybe slightly overcompressed that I enjoy because I like that sort of feeling that it gives the music. You can definitely use overcompression as a sound effect on lots of things. It sounds really cool on drums a lot of the times. But if you do it too much, the cymbals can sound just completely either non-existent or they lose what they're supposed to be doing. And in this moment's album, A Star-Crossed Wasteland is really badly overcompressed. And that may have been in the mastering, not necessarily Kevin Churko's fault, but I was astonished when I heard Blood, which I think sounds fantastic, but is definitely a different approach than Star-Crossed Wasteland and The Dream. Both of those albums are very much a metal band sounding like a metal band. But when we got to Blood, we started to see the first little bits of what In This Moment would become on their next 3 albums. And that is a metal band that has very little real metal elements to it. And what I mean by that, by real, is everything in This Moment song is produced to within an absolute inch of its life. And I don't necessarily say that poorly. Every drum that you're hearing on an In This Moment album is a completely replaced electronic sounding drum. It does sort of sound like a drum kit, but you're hearing a kick and a snare and maybe even cymbals on some of their work that are completely electronic based instruments. And that's totally fine. I have no problem with that. I'm going to assume that the drums were probably even recorded using an electronic kit, which is not uncommon in metal music. However, in most metal music, you choose samples of a kick and a snare and tom drums and any other drums you have that sound like real drums. But one thing In This Moment does is they choose really fantastic sounding kick and snare and the whole entire drum kit, basically. And it doesn't necessarily sound real. It doesn't sound like a real kick drum or a real snare drum, but it does sound fantastic with what they're trying to do. And I personally really like that. I like the drums on a lot of In This Moment's albums. But what happens is when you combine that with the fact that there's all these big sort of like backgroundy, chunky synths, the bass is always this perfect sort of sounding sort of like sub bass mixed with a little bit of bass. Like when you listen to an In This Moment album, especially their last 3, it's hard to tell what you're hearing if it's real or not. There have even been moments where I've questioned whether the guitars are actual guitars or if they're just, electronic digital versions of a guitar. But of course you can record a guitar, and I'm assuming what they do with this is very similar to what you would do with most modern metal or heavy albums nowadays. You record the guitar with maybe your amp signal if you want, but then you also record a dry signal. And then what you do is you go through the process of reamping. So you take that single track of the guitar and you run it through digital amplifiers and you get a tone that you like for the high frequencies and a tone that you like for the low frequencies. And maybe if you're getting crazy, a tone you like for the mid frequencies. You can do it however much you want. And then what you do is you layer these different passes of frequencies and EQ out the parts of them that you don't like on top of each other to create what is theoretically sort of the perfect guitar tone. It would be something that would be almost impossible to get if you were actually playing, and it's not a true representation of any real amp or anything like that. It's a combination of all these different sounds. You do that for the guitar on the left, you do that for the guitar on the right, you do that for a guitar that's probably in the middle as well, that doesn't have as much high frequencies, and maybe you have stereo delay on things. But if you do that with the guitars, and you do something similar with the bass, and you have these not realistic sounding drums, what you end up with something like In This Moment, at least in their cases, you end up with something that ends up sounding more to me like an electronic song almost than a heavy metal band playing heavy metal. Now, I want to say this is very important. I think that's really cool. I think that's a neat aspect to this band. So with that being said, I enjoy that aspect of their production. And I'm excited to hear what this new stuff sounds like. And if my reading that one sentence about most of this being produced, co-written, all this by Kane Churko is correct, that means they may be working with someone different on this album, and that gives me a little bit of hope that they may have changed their formula up a little bit. I know I said I enjoy the sounds that they have, but over their last few albums, and this probably is so cliched in like the heavy metal world, but I feel like since they've gone away from being a slightly more organic sounding band, or I guess since they've gone away from a slightly more organic sound, I really feel like they've lost a lot of the things that made them special on their first 3-4 albums. I think Maria Brink's screams are absolutely incredible. I think she has one of the greatest voices in all of music. I literally really think that. But my biggest criticism of their last 3 albums in particular, specifically their more their last 2. Ritual was, I think, the most egregious example of this, but they also did it on Mother a lot. But Ritual was very bad. They distort her voice, and I understand what she's trying to do. She's going for that horror sort of creepy vibe, and they're adding distortion to her voice. And I don't mean distortion like when she's singing, she sings with distortion. If you've seen other reactions to In This Moment, which I love watching because it's very fun to see people reacting to Maria Brink singing for the first time, because obviously she can sing absolutely gorgeously and beautifully with all these amazing vocal harmonies that sound amazing. And then she can also scream her guts out. It sounds fantastic. When she's screaming, you have distortion on your voice. You're distorting your voice. That's how it sounds more of like a cluster almost, rather than a pure tone. I'm not talking about that kind of distortion. I'm talking about having actual distortion. Here, I'll do it on my voice right now. This sort of type of distortion. This isn't a perfect representation of what they do in their music, but it's definitely an effect. It gives you that sort of like throwback sort of horror vibe, old-timey tape saturated sort of vibe. So when you do that, it can be a really neat effect. However, especially on Ritual, but they did a lot on Black Widow as well. Too much for me on my taste on Black Widow, but it was a little better on Mother. They did it so much that you never really got to hear Maria Brink's voice. It was almost every verse on Black Widow and Ritual, the verses were her using this like distortion on her voice. And it's when you have this very clean, crisp, completely perfect production that I've already talked about, and then you have this distorted thing right in the middle, to me it can sound a little disjointed. Again, I understand they're going for that sort of like throwback horror aesthetic, and I think that using that effect here and there around an album, like over the course of an album, can be really cool and really add to the sort of creepy atmosphere that they are definitely going for in their music. I have not heard a second of this song, but I wanted to go through and explain all of that to say I'm super curious to hear how this song is going to sound production-wise. Is it going to sound like their previous albums, or is it maybe going to have a slightly more organic or raw feel to it? That's kind of what I hope. Are we going to get a ton of distorted vocals from Maria Brink? I don't want that. I want to hear her beautiful, gorgeous voice produced really well, and I don't care if there's pitch correction and whatnot on it. Again, I just said all these other things they're doing to the song to make the drums, the guitar, the bass, the keyboards, the sound effects, the sampling, all that stuff sounds as perfect as possible. I would expect them to do that to her voice as well, though again, we all know that she is a fantastic singer. So are we going to get distorted vocals on her point? Are we going to get screamed vocals? I hope so. This is their single, their first song from this album, which the album, by the way, comes out on October 27th. If you're unaware, they've released that information yesterday as well. So I'm very excited. I will be doing an entire reaction to that entire. I will be doing a reaction to that entire album on my channel when that comes out. I'm very much looking forward to that. Some of my favorite songs of all time are In This Moment songs. I think their song Whore is one of the greatest songs I've ever heard. It's absolutely catchy as heck. It's fantastic. I love it. I also love Blood. I love every song off of Dream. I think that album is fantastic from front to back. I think it's a perfect album. I also really enjoy Big Bad Wolf. I know I'm mentioning a lot of their singles right now, but Big Bad Wolf is just so badass and cool. I really enjoy that song. I can't think of any songs that really stood out to me on Ritual and Mother, but I probably just listened to those albums slightly less than I did, to Blood and The Dream for sure. But let's go ahead and get into this. I've talked for 15 minutes. I didn't want to talk for too long. So like I said, we're going to be listening to a direct rip of the music video. So there might be some sound effects and things in here that I'm assuming won't be in the song. However, one of the things that I love about In This Moment's music is the atmosphere, is the creepy vibe to it. You know, I mentioned earlier that I liked Venomous Rat Regeneration Vendor from Rob Zombie. I absolutely love anything that was very clearly influenced by Rob Zombie, and Maria Brink and In This Moment very clearly are inspired by Rob Zombie a lot. And it's really cool to know that the people who work on this music with them have also worked on Rob Zombie albums. I didn't know that till I looked up Kane and Kevin Churko. So, that was the other thing I wanted to mention. Kane Churko, the son of Kevin Churko, who's produced and done most of the other In This Moment albums, he has been working on a lot of the In This Moment albums with his father as a Pro Tools editing engineer, just a general editing engineer in general, mixing engineer. So he's been doing things on these albums, but he was never, I don't believe, listed as the full-on main credited producer like he is for this track. All right, let's get into it. This is The Purge from In This Moment in 3, 2, 1. And again, I want to reiterate, if you skipped the whole beginning, which I wouldn't begrudge you, my computer does not have the strength to handle doing a reaction with a video, so I'm just listening to the audio. Oh boy. Sub bass, like a synth bass patch. Distorted vocals. Whisper vocal on the side. Drums sound the same as they have. Very big. I like the way it sounds. Her vocals have been totally distorted this entire time. Still distorted. I like the creepy vibes, for sure. It's giving me Big Bad Wolf vibes, for sure. So far, I've not heard any guitars, maybe a little bit. Interesting. So there were definitely some guitars there in the chorus, and they were exactly what I expected them to sound like. This is basically just an electronic song, which is exactly what I thought it was going to be. I'm totally fine with that. Okay, the guitar did not come in here. Usually they have the guitars come in over their second verses. Totally distorted vocals in both verses. This is not looking good for me in terms of my overall enjoyment of the album. This is definitely In This Moment doing their formula. Love those oscillated basses. I don't think the singing vocals sound that amazing here. She's been doing that sort of like whisper sing thing this entire time. We'll see what she does here. Is she gonna do some screaming here? Here comes some heavy music. You could take the guitar out of this and it would basically sound the exact same. Put in a synth and it'd be no different. But that's what they've been doing the last few albums, like I said. The guitar is really a non-factor. And I suppose I'm supposed to have been sitting here going, oh my gosh, listen to how long she held out that note. There were delays and stuff all over it. It was really cool, and it was nice that she screamed, but they've done that so many times. Like, nothing about this song to me has felt special at all, other than the fact that that kick is massive. Ah, man, this is disappointing. Okay. Dang it. This is very disappointing to me. They did literally exactly what I thought they were going to do. If you told me, hey, what is the most stereotypical cliched in this moment sounds that they could have? What's the most stereotypical make an in this moment song? Make it the most stereotypical cliched in this moment song. That's exactly what I would guess they would do. 100% that exact thing. The vocals were distorted the entire time she wasn't singing in the chorus, and when it got to the chorus, I thought her vocals felt very thin. The layers were spread out nice, but the mix did feel like they weren't pushing the metal aspect of the music at all. Anything that was in that song, I don't think there was any real bass in it whatsoever, and that's totally fine. Again, all of these things are fine. I'm not necessarily critiquing or criticizing the way it sounds so much as the fact that they have done this so many times before. It's no longer special. And what I was really hoping with this, when I saw that one sentence on the underneath their music video, that it was produced and engineered and co-written and mixed and everything by Kane Churko instead of Kevin Churko, my hopes were maybe this is good. They need to inject something different into their veins. They need to have a fresh perspective in order to make their music relevant again, in my opinion. Not that this song won't be enormous. Not that a lot of people probably don't like this song. You know, I'm sure a lot of people do love this. But to me, I hear that, and I hear the exact same thing I've been hearing for the last few albums. It doesn't seem inspired to me at all listening to it. I wasn't watching the video. I'm sure the video had all these really cool visuals to it. You know, I love all their visuals are always amazing, but you're a band and I'm sitting here listening to a song. And so a song should absolutely not rely on its visuals of a video to make it interesting. So yeah, I'll just leave it there. This is very disappointing to me. I liked that song, and I think that it sounded cool, but because of everything that I've mentioned, everything I talked about beforehand, I was completely right with how that was produced. You could take the guitars out of that song, and it would absolutely affect nothing. Even in the heavy part, the heavy bridge, when she was doing her long scream, which was so affected, it was hard to even hear that she was doing it. You know, there were lots of layers, which is very common to layer heavy vocals. There was lots of layers. There was so much there was some distortion on it, I believe, in terms of like digital distortion added after the fact. But her voice was she was screaming. But there was so many layers of her scream. There was so many delays on it, looping to help make it feel long. There was lots of reverb on it. And it was a long, constant thing happening, almost more as sort of like an afterthought or a consistency in the part of the song that's supposed to feel very heavy. You know, we're supposed to be headbanging, and instead, because of the way that was mixed, like I said, if you took the guitars out of that and you put in some sort of like a synth bass or something, it would sound basically the exact same. There was at no moment during that song were they emphasizing the metal part of this metal band. And that's really interesting. They have been doing that now since Black Widow. Black Widow was their first album where I feel they basically decided we're going to make an electronic album. You know, if Maria Brink made a solo album, I would assume it would sound, I mean, she could do whatever she wanted with her solo album, and I hope one day we get that, and I hope she decides to do completely different genres of music, like just whatever she wants to do. If she wants to do songs full of just screaming like on their first album, that's fine. I would love that. That would probably be what I would prefer. Screaming verses and then sung choruses. That's what I loved about their first album, which definitely doesn't sound as good as a lot of this stuff. It sounds like a more raw band, but that's when they were young. But if she even decided to just make like a pop album or something more like Lady Gaga or something, I think that would be amazing. But to say that this is in this moment the band, And maybe the guys who, maybe it is the guys in this band, the dude with the long dreadlocks. I've seen this band live, I think twice actually. Not that that gives me any credence or whatever to this. I don't know what they do in the studio, but with my experience, I can understand how they're getting all the sounds they're getting, and that's just what they're putting forth, right? Their music is definitely, we are basically an electronic band, which I love electronic music. I feel like I'm giving all these caveats. I sort of feel like I'm digging myself into a hole, but I can hear comments yelling at me going, well, you don't this, and that's fine. It's just my opinion at the end of the day. And my opinion of this is that it was disappointing, not because of the song itself, but because of it was so utterly predictable that I will be shocked if this, having heard that and that be the first single, maybe they decided to release that as the first single because it's the most like things they've done, and the rest of the album will be shocking to me. However, I doubt it. I'm excited to listen to the album as a whole. I want them to prove me wrong, but this band, along with some of my other favorite bands that have been going for a long time now since I was young, they are one of these bands that would greatly benefit from having other people introduced into their way of making a record. I think that they need new producers. They need to go to a whole different environment with different producers and they need to shake everything up, basically, is what I'm saying. Maybe that would be a terrible idea. Maybe it would ruin their music completely, but they need some fresh perspectives, in my opinion. I'll leave it there. You all can yell at me in the comments and tell me how bad and terrible and stupid my opinions are. That's fine. But I'll hopefully see you back here maybe on October 27th or around there when I react to the entire album. Thank you very much for listening to this album or this song with me. And if you want to stick around, listen to some Metallica stuff, whatever, click around the channel. If you want to just get out of here, make sure you leave me a nasty comment first. If you want to like the video, that'd be awesome as well. I'm trying to grow my channel. Thank you very much, and I will see you, or not, next time.